Welcome back. So this is part 2 of my home ownership in 2026 series. And today I get a lot of questions around this topic, and it's becoming a very popular one. Buying a home using your 401k. Well, today we're going to break down what that really means. Let's get into it. Of course, as we all know, a 401k is a retirement plan. It is something that you invest in for your future, and it is a really good thing to have if you have an employer. Many people use their 401ks, and the automatic withdrawals are put in there. You're able to make additional contributions to build up that compound interest. And using your 401k to buy your home is actually not something that's brand new. What we've heard recently is being able to purchase a home using your 401k without penalties. Now that is something new because, as we all know, any type of loans against your 401k or early withdrawals absolutely come with penalties. So let's look at the difference between that, okay? So of course, a 401k loan and a withdrawal actually differ quite a bit. Loans avoid any early withdrawal penalties. That is interest that you're paying back, but you're paying it back to yourself. So you want to make sure you have an understanding of what those numbers look like when it comes to borrowing against your 401k, like I said, versus it being a withdrawal. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that the repayment term sometimes can depend on the employer's rules. So you may work for a company that has certain stipulations around borrowing or making any kind of withdrawals against for your 401k. So make sure you understand what that looks like, as well as job changes. If you change from that job, you may have a faster repayment timeline. So again, it's one of those things where you make sure you fully understand what that looks like. I have helped people use their 401k, of course, not me personally, but people going through that process. I've worked with clients that did not qualify for other options when it came to their down payment, which can be a significant amount when you're buying a home. And so having money in your 401k, my personal take on it is know the numbers. It's your money. You should have access to be able to use it, especially in real estate, which is an appreciating asset, something that you're going to live in, you're going to occupy. So there's value in doing that. There is also risk involved with that, right? So let's talk about some of the biggest risks. Of course, putting money in the stock market over the last 20 years, we all have seen it, especially lately. The stock market is a very strong investment vehicle for retirement planning. And that compound interest is something you don't want to miss out on if you're putting money in on a regular basis and having that money grow over time. So of course, that is an opportunity risk, is having your long-term costs associated with your gains not necessarily being there if you're making those withdrawals. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. However, I do have one. So I always want to recommend and advise anyone, before you do this, make sure you're talking to your financial advisor. You understand what those numbers mean. Your age matters in this situation, of course. Your stability on the job, what kind of work you're doing, and having access to those funds to use it to purchase a home. It is a very strategic conversation that you want to have around that, okay? Another thing to look at that, like I said, this is not a shortcut. This is leverage with consequence, right? So it definitely has some upsides and some downsides, but many people have found that this has been a really good solution. Now, one of the things that I think is important here that is coming up lately is being able to, that I think is really to resolve a lot of the affordability, right? With people being able to buy a home in this market. We know that there are some challenges. It's very evident. A lot of the first-time buyers being able to come up with the down payment to buy a home. This current administration is trying to propose solutions for that. So right now, this is not something that is set in stone. It is not something that has passed as law, but it is something that's being talked about. And again, I'm all for it. I'm all for having options and having conversations that help people better position themselves to be able to get into home ownership. Because even with the stock market growth, some 600% over the last 20 years, which is fantastic and phenomenal. And I absolutely believe everyone should be investing in stocks and real estate. Those are two of the most biggest and best vehicles to be able to grow and build wealth. But if we're looking again at investing in the stock market and using your 401k to purchase a home, this is not a decision that you want to take lightly. Now, and again, another thing too, when we're talking about that, of course, where you live often matters. That's a conversation that people need to consider. So in Oklahoma, our housing is considered affordable as we compare it to some other states. 20% of our residents, or I say 20% of our residents, most Oklahomans rather, that own homes here have their housing costs at or below 20%. So they're not spending, the average is, 25% or higher in some larger cities. So with Oklahoma affordability's equation, our home prices are lower than the national average. So that small difference can really affect your ability to be able to put down a lower down payment. Another thing buyers should absolutely compare the incentives. If you're looking at a new construction home, are the builders offering any incentives? Are there any grants that you could qualify for? Are there any down payment assistance options that you can look into? Because that can maybe offset and compare that to what you're borrowing from your 401k. Those benefits may actually work in your favor much more than borrowing from your 401k. So make sure you're comparing that up against that, those options. And a good real estate professional is able to make those recommendations to you. We're able to negotiate on your behalf certain terms. You may qualify for credits, seller credits that we can give that in the deal. There's just so many ways that we can be creative, that you can get creative in purchasing a home that, yes, although borrowing against your 401k is a solution, and especially without penalty, there may be other options for you to do this. So keep in mind that, I think it's important that people have choice. People are able to leverage their money in the best way possible, and understanding what that means to you. Always consult with your real estate professional, your lender, and as well as your financial advisor before borrowing against your 401k and understanding what those numbers truly mean. So I'm Adelia Sosanya. I hope this information has been helpful. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to watch next time, where we're going to continue our series on home ownership in 2026, where I'm going to break down some of these options for you to become a very strong buyer, what that looks like, and how you can better position yourself to own real estate in this market. Until next time, have a good day.